Hello, everyone. I'm Mr. E.
And I am Bolton Mortimer, otherwise known as the Authenticator. And we are the Duality of Man.
Today, we're talking about climate change and the insanity surrounding it. Because while the climate is no doubt changing, it has probably since the Earth has formed. It's not what so many people are claiming it is, and it's certainly not going to be the apocalypse of mankind.
And while humans might be a factor, note a factor, in the evolution of said climate, we are only a factor, and we've only been here for like the historical equivalent of 5 minutes. So, yeah. And we've only been doing things that would actually have an impact on the climate for the human scale equivalent of 5 minutes. So it's a minute scale of time within a minute scale of time, like planetarily speaking.
Yeah, okay, so let's go into the first article that I have here. This one was making the rounds on Twitter a couple weeks ago. Scotland cut down 14 million trees to clear way for wind turbines.
Oh ye gods, this one.
Oh, the irony.
The,
Now, the reason that they are focused so much on green energy is to reduce carbon emissions. Now, tell me, Dalton, is there anything in nature that naturally removes carbon from the air?
oh, say anything that produces photosynthesizes on a large enough scale, like say an entire goddamn old growth forest, perchance just throwing throwing a dart at a random calendar, I guess here. Just
Yeah, they're concerned about carbon emissions and you cut down trees, which, in case they don't know elementary science, trees take in CO2 and produce oxygen.
also trees, right, are this thing we like to call renewable sources of energy. Unlike vast fuck off sized pieces of metal with wind turbines attached to them, namely the giant fuck off fans that that generate wind power and whatnot.
You know,
So
I never thought about trees as renewable energy, but you're actually right. You cut down the tree, you burn it for energy, it releases carbon into the air, which the other trees then use to grow.
well, it's not only that. If you and to be fair, this is something that we did need to learn about a century ago. You do kind of need to remember to replant a tree when you take down a tree, but that is a very, very simple action to do because the
Yeah,
seeds will come from the other trees as long as you have enough trees to sustain
yeah,
your.
and trees can
Oh,
produce lots of seeds.
yeah, and it's not like trees are unused to dealing with a bunch of them being missing because forest fires and lightning strikes are naturally occurring phenomena. And in fact, in some cases, especially in old growth forests, one of the things that can make a old growth forest fertile again if it's gone dead for a while is controlled forest fires, which will then make the ground more fertile and make life spawn all the more from the ashes, literally. But never the fuck
It's
mind. Also, complete another sidebar here, but as a fan of mythology and a practicing occultist, I have to point this out. You destroyed an entire forest in Scotland. Um, you had better hope that the Tuath Taig weren't anywhere in that forest, because if so, you're all fucked now. Just throwing that out there.
it gets more ironic because last year Scotland was the site of the United Nations 26th conference of the climate summit, and at that conference they agreed to end deforestation by 2030. So just one last year, end
We're going to
deforestation
end
this year by 2030.
deforestation. Parentheses, let's burn down all the trees and replace them with wind turbines. Derp.
Yeah, Yeah, so they cut down 14 million trees to clear the forest land for 21 wind turbines. And
Also, 40 million? I that's a literal, especially considering how many old growth forests there are in Scotland, which are the forests you want to keep around. Like young forests, you can almost get away with doing this too, but old growth forests in particular are massive, entirely like ecologically healthy ecosystems. So 40 million trees in a place where 90% of the trees you'll find are probably old growth in nature. That's that for all of the Gaianism with a secular skin on it that all this climate activism tends to be, and double especially when you're talking about Scotland, because again, the various legends of the Landvites and the Tuatha Taig, you people really are asking to get nature just pissed off at you in your general direction, aren't you?
yeah,
Ugh.
he said that the the Scottish government assured people that they were going to plant more trees, but how often do governments actually keep their promises?
Okay, I'll give it to them because like this is one of the few um non-climate change necessary ecological things that actually make, because this is the other thing about environmentalism and the current zeitgeist. A lot of the climate initiatives make sense on their own terms, but they don't make sense in the context of the idea of climate change. And ironically, a lot of people strawman the, for lack of a better word, conservative side of this argument by saying, "Oh, you just want to live in, a ecological dystopia with coal plants everywhere and da 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 da." And it's like, no, most conservatives. And now, granted, I'm not a conservative, so maybe I can't speak to this, but every conservative I've ever talked to, they all appear to be very pro preservation of nature because they're all very fond of the
Uh,
unspoiled nature of the natural world and how great it is to share with future generations and all that business. So there's that. But you could sell a lot of these initiatives if you just decoupled them from the overall like zeitgeist or worldview of climate change. But for some reason you ideologically can't do that because we have to be Gaian apocalypticists basically with a secular skin on top.
I mean, not just that, but you're installing wind turbines. First of all, wind turbines have to be manufactured, which requires usually energy and almost certainly petroleum products to make the components to build the
Yeah,
wind
and
farm.
again, usually these are manufactured from very heavy, very non-biodegradable metals. So we cut down 40 million trees to build giant fuck off metal skyscrapers with wind turbines on the end of them. Um, that
I
doesn't.
mean, not only that, but wind turbines themselves require oil as lubricant.
Yeah, and again, let's lest we forget that the one kind of non-fossil fuel power supply that would be sustainable and would also create a bunch of freaking jobs while we're at it, i.e., nuclear power, is the one we're forbidden from usually mentioning ever because reasons. So, in other words, we waste millions upon millions of dollars of people's time, money, and lives on renew air quotes renewable resources that are not actually all that renewable and aren't efficient enough to sustain a power grid. But we can't talk about nuclear, and we can't just leave woods alone or use wood like we've done for millions and millions of fucking years. Because reasons.
All right, now, you know, a lot of these countries in Europe have made moves to end their dependency on say natural gas or coal or fossil fuels, but it hasn't really been working out. I have an article here
Oh,
um,
jeez.
Germany's green energy failure. Germany turns back to coal and natural gas as millions of its solar panels are blanketed in snow and ice. This is from February of last year. See, Energiewende is a German word for energy transition. It's a policy launched by the German government in 2000 to decarbonize its primary energy supply. The program has been praised by many environmentalists and others called it a failure. See,
So, in other words, Germany tried to create a big national project and it failed horribly. At least no one died this time.
yeah, and not only that, but Germany has actually been shutting down its nuclear power plants. You see, it's been switching. It's not just stopped using coal and natural gas, or at least it tried to. It started using it again, but it's still shutting down its power plants. See, Germany won't extend the life of the three remaining nuclear power stations due to its ongoing energy crisis. So they stopped producing energy in their own country, but they were importing it from like Russia and Ukraine up until the war broke out. And
Uh,
now, even though they're in an energy crisis, they're still shutting down their nuclear power plants.
so, in other words, once again, we are supposed to get away from coal and natural gas, and that's fine. Coal and natural gas aren't particularly efficient either way, so that's fine. But instead of using the one kind of renewable energy that we know is not just sustainable, but probably the most efficient power source on the fucking planet at this point in time, instead of using that, we're going to focus on solar panels that aren't efficient enough to sustain themselves and wind turbines which also aren't efficient enough to sustain themselves. And this is Germany's idea of a utopian future. Why am I not surprised that this is going to shive?
Germany just seems to be the place where bad ideas are born.
Well, okay, not just where bad ideas are born, but where bad ideas are put into practice and then immediately go apocalyptically bad. But again, at least no one has died of this particular bad idea of Germany's yet.
So apparently, they started doing this in the wake of the 2011 Fukushima disaster in Japan, which again, it didn't fail on its own. It was hit by a literal natural disaster.
Mother Nature was literally like, no, just fuck you in particular, random island, because reasons. Which this is a very simple. Okay, this is the thing with nuclear power. I understand why people are afraid of nuclear power. I do because nukes are scary, and that's here, and that's neither here nor there. And of course, there's those two, count them, two cases where nuclear power plants went completely tits up, and it went bad. One of which was the result of communist mismanagement in Soviet Russia, and one of which was the result of a literal goddamn tsunami because someone was stupid enough to build the thing on an island near a fault line. So here's a wacky idea. We don't put we don't put communist governments in charge of building these incredibly intricate power plants, and we don't build them in the middle of goddamn islands or anywhere near fault lines. Done. Solution. So it's kind of like how I it's kind of like how I hate that because the Hindenburg happened, we can never talk about how Zeppelins are awesome anymore. When you could have just as easily solved the Hindenburg problem by substituting hydrogen for helium. Like that was the only problem with the Hindenburg. Basically, was it was it was slightly cheaper to do hydrogen instead of helium, even though several of the engineers literally suggested we probably should use helium because it's more stable at the time. But they didn't
Yeah,
because reasons, and then it exploded, and now Zeppelins just are not a thing anymore. And it's like, okay, guys, the one the one and only time this fucked up has very obvious things we can account for. So let's just account for them and continue along the sensible route, please. Same thing with nukes. It's like, yes, if we build them on an island in the middle of a bunch of fault lines, things will probably go bad. And if you leave communists in charge of fucking anything scientific, it will probably go bad. So let's just not do either of those things. And when you take those variables out of the equation, you suddenly find that nuclear power is one of the most efficient, most secure, and most stable power sources in the fucking world, even significantly more efficient than the most efficient fossil fuel power plant have ever been.
I mean, in addition to shutting down nuclear power plants, they're also pushing more for electric cars, which comes with its very own set of problems. One, most people don't want an electric car. Two, electric charging stations are relatively rare compared to good old fashioned gas pumps.
And
Let's see.
three, most of the electricity for said electric cars will, for the foreseeable future, come not from the happy green quasi Gaian sources that we all want, but the coal and natural gas power plants that we're trying to phase out. So this is a
Four,
complete
it would
non-starter.
also Four, it would also put a massive strain on our already overstressed energy grid.
Yeah.
And five, they could also be extremely dangerous because electric cars are basically just giant batteries. And Dalton, do you know what happens to a battery if it's get damaged?
Um. There, it strikes me that there's a lot of boom booms going on there. And have you guys ever seen the end of the movie Small Soldiers? The thing about the Transformers exploding and it resulting in a massive EMP. Well, imagine that, but every car on the face of the planet in this
Yeah,
possible future.
batteries hold energy. When the battery breaks, that energy is released and they freaking explode. So imagine getting into a car accident, and instead of just the car being damaged, it's almost like a very, very good chance that they freaking explode.
And even if they don't outright explode, they can often leak energy. And just because it's not radioactive doesn't mean constantly being exposed to oversaturated forms of electrical energy is in any way a good thing or won't result in a bunch of cancer, probably. So there's that too. Not to mention the battery acid itself, which is also caustic, and several of the battery components, which are also caustic. So yeah, it's basically either going to be a giant explosion that will kill everyone in a ball of fire and death, or it will slowly poison you to death with mutation and cancer and every other possible kind of industrial poison you can possibly think of that you might find in a battery.
Yeah. And not only that, but the rare earth minerals needed to make these batteries are extremely rare.
Yeah, and just one further cherry on top of this particular Sunday of, oh my god, this is a terrible idea. You can actually make internal combustion engines that run on ethanol fuels or organic fuels. So you don't even necessarily need electric cars or um, fossil fuels. You can literally make something that can approximate fossil fuels from like corn and other like food waste products. Considering that we already produce far more of those food stuffs than we can conceivably eat in 1,000 lifetimes, why don't we just go like if we're going this green secular Gaianism route, the Earth has provided us with possible fuel alternatives just by its very nature. And we can literally make machines that run on the same food stuff that we also consume. And even the waste products of the food that we consume. So it
Not
would
only
be a
that,
win-win in
but also,
every.
it also help out with the landfill problem.
Yes, it would.
But these things would make sense, and we can't expect our government to do that.
But you expect the German government to make any sense? How dare you off to the camps with you for expecting the German government to make sense? Yeah, the more things change, the more they stay the same, and the more I weep for humanity. Uh,
The thing is, like everybody who is pushing for like the electric car by like the people who are pushing it the hardest, They all have the money to afford electric cars. But have you ever looked up the price for an electric car? Like the cheapest ones are like $50,000.
Yeah. And yes, you could hypothetically trade in your current car for a new electric model, and in fact, the government might someday incentivize that someday, not all too far away. But that still raises the problems that we brought up about things like efficiency, rarity of materials, expense of actually producing them, the materials necessary to actually produce them, and the possibility of the giant fucking boom and or slowly poisoned to death by industrial waste product options.
You could only really use them in cities, like out in the country, like where you could go long stretches of miles. You may never see a charging station, but you'll
But
probably see plenty of small gas stations.
you see, in the not too distant future, that won't be a problem because we'll be living in a real life equivalent of Ready Player One, where massive skyscrapers will just be stacked every fucking where because everyone will be in the human equivalent of rabbit cages, and they will be fine with it because we say so. Signed, the World Economic Forum.
God, what a dystopia we're heading into.
I the thing that baffles me about the dystopian ideas of our alleged betters here isn't even the evil. The evil I could almost respect on just like sheer Machiavellian chutzpah it would take to accomplish levels. It's the unoriginality of the dystopia that bothers me more than anything. Because most of the ideas coming from Silicon Valley in the form of the metaverse or the World Economic Forum are literally just bits and pieces of Ready Player One, 1984, and San Angeles from the movie Demolition Man. And I have to ask the question of, if you're going to be ridiculously mustache twirlingly evil, could you not at least be ridiculously mustache twirlingly evil in an original and not obvious way? Because here's the thing that confuses me about the current crop of aristocrats. They want to create a dystopian future. Fine, that we'll just hand wave that away in devil's advocate mode for now. But do they really think that people are so stupid that they can literally just take ideas from fiction and go, you know, this Ready Player One metaverse concept, this Oasis concept from Ready Player One, we could turn that into a thing and call it the metaverse, and no one would notice the similarities. And then, you know, the World Economic Forum. What if we actually just did 1984, like for real? And I'm sitting there like, okay, you want to be evil. That's perfectly fine and well and all right for the purposes of this hypothetical. Could you not be evil in a more intellectual and less derivative way that you're obviously going to get caught? Because this is the other thing. They do things that are obvious parallels to actual dystopian fiction that we have, probably deliberately on some level. And then they wonder why the people who are educated enough to know about these dystopian novels catch them out for doing the IRL equivalent of basically these things. Well, if
Yeah,
you don't
and
want to
the
get caught for doing the dystopian things you're doing by ripping them off from fiction, then come up with your own freaking dystopian ideas and don't make them quite as derivative of dystopian novels. Because if you
like
make them
the
derivative of dystopian novels, then people who are familiar enough with dystopian novels will catch you out for it.
and the thing is, like the meetings that they have, like the meetings of the World Economic Forum. I just feel like I'm watching a meeting of Spectre from the early Bond films.
It literally is like do you remember early Simpsons, the like Republicans of Springfield meeting that Mr. Burns was a member of, and they decided to run Sideshow Bob as the candidate? It's literally
No,
like
I don't.
it's literally like that, or like another Simpsons reference. It's like Hank Scorpio. It's literally like freaking Hank Scorpio from The Simpsons, and they wonder why we go, guys. We respect that you're aristocratically evil because aristocrats are going to aristocrat and all, but could you not do it in a way that's quite so obvious? Because it's really disturbing how you're literally just taking ideas from obvious fictional dystopias, forgetting that they're dystopias, and going, yes, this is a perfectly viable model for the future of the civilization. What could possibly go wrong with this?
Yeah, you're roboting for a little bit there.
Oh, was I? Damn.
Yeah. StreamYard is saying that my signal is low. I don't know
Yeah,
why.
see
Like,
now you're it's not see now you're roboting for me. I'm pretty sure that's on your end.
yeah. Hold on. Let me move to a different room. Keep talking. I'll try and fix this.
Alrighty, but yeah, it. I realize this is a complete sidebar from the environmentalism topic, but they're related because 90% of the dystopian uh, things are being buttressed either by social justice talking points or environmentalism talking points, and most often some combination of the two, because of course the two are related. I mean, lest we forget that the hatred saint of the environment for the past cycle has been Greta Thunberg, who is the living embodiment of a young a young neotenous girl with mental disorders, thereby having several more layers of victimhood. So femininity, neoteny, and victimhood all wrapped into a presentable package, spouting the moralizing dogma of how dare you, i.e., the exact same thing that all moral panics have always done, i.e., because the thing is, women in particular have this power over the moral pecking order. That that is the that is the feminine prerogative to control the moral pecking order. That's why you have the stereotype of Helen Lovejoy going, "Won't somebody please think of the children?" And why you, of course, in the modern era have the things like the Karens who are going, "I demand to speak to the manager because reasons." It's because women have always controlled the moral pecking order. So sending out a young, neotenous, easily victimizable by virtue of mental disorders girl to moralize at us basically hits all of the all of the evolutionary psychology buttons in our brains, because woman hits one button, young hits another button, neotenous another button, and victimized or otherwise damaged by mental disorders yet another button. So it's literally trying to go. The power of victimhood compels you into believing our environmentalist dogma. And presumably E is fixing the thing. Yeah, he's going off of his iPad and I'm going off of my phone, so it's kind of a wonder we actually managed to do these, folks. Um, but nevertheless, we usually do. Usually. Also, the reason we weren't here last week was because E was on a vacation, so that is why this is a week later than usual. But anyway, now we wait for E to return, and I'm going to check the chat just in case there are people here to be talking to. We
Yeah, I'm
have an
back.
Ed
Sorry
Brewer.
about that, everybody.
Okay, yeah.
So, what were you saying?
I was just pointing out the kind of, for lack of a better word, intersection of the social justice framework and the environmentalist framework in the form of Greta Thunberg, and basically them trying to weaponize um, femininity, neoteny, and victimhood to morally shame us all into believing the approved framework
Yeah,
by way of Greta.
you do you do not make decisions based on a whining child. A whining child will ask for candy for every meal of the day. You do not allow them to eat candy for every meal of the
Well,
day.
okay, I mean, to be fair to her, she's 16, but she also has
16 is
autism.
age. Like,
So,
how much did you know about the world at 16 years old? Because I can tell you right now, I thought I knew a lot. I barely knew anything.
I mean, not to be mean, but I think I was mostly okay at 16. But then again, yeah, uh, my college years disabused me of knowing all that much. Though to be fair, I started school a year early, so by the time I was 16, I was already a junior in high school.
But you know, a lot of these policies that they're making, they just don't work. Like they are not going to accomplish the thing that they
Yeah,
said
they
they
are
would
not
accomplish.
logical. They do not follow from the premises they're starting from.
Yeah, and not only that, but a lot of them are just excuses to funnel money, our tax money, into the hands of friends who run like nonprofits, NGOs, like companies that construct wind turbines or solar panels. Like it's almost all grift, and this is just an excuse in order to engage in it.
But see, that's the thing. I don't think it is opportunistic or grifting. I think it is genuine. I think they're just too sheltered to understand why their solutions don't actually make any fucking sense. It's the Marie Antoinette let them eat cake solution all over again. We have decided that this environmentalist issue is an important issue, and we have also decided that these are the approved solutions. And anyone who says we need to look at any other solutions is very obviously a bad person or an uneducated person and therefore not valid. Therefore, we don't have to listen to them.
I mean, I would argue that it's both. They could genuinely believe the thing, but also, hey, if this thing
Well,
needs
yeah,
to be
I
done,
mean, self interest is always going to be a motivator in the back of everyone's mind at some level, and that's why there's so much cognitive dissonance with these people because they want to be all high-minded and selfless because their moral framework basically says anything resembling self-interest is fascism, but because evolutionary psychology is going to be evolutionary psychology, no one can be entirely devoid of self-interest, otherwise they starve to death. So you have the conscious mind of these people saying, "I don't matter. I'm supposed to sacrifice my life and my happiness on behalf of other people." But you have the subconscious mind of these people going, "But if I actually do sacrifice my own self-interest for these people, I'll starve to death." Hence, cognitive dissonance.
the thing is, these people want to make these sweeping changes for us, for you. They don't want to change their lifestyles at all, because you know what would really help climate change? Ride sharing, like sharing like a car ride with somebody else, or flying commercial. But what do?
Oh,
Whenever they go to these green conferences, they fly their private
yeah,
jet
great
there.
fuck off flying jets of their own design. Yeah, basically. Um, Also, in a world where there are Skype and Zoom calls and video calls of every description, like literally anyone can video call on Facebook now. Do these grand galas that people fly to even need to exist in the form they currently do? Could we not all just Zoom call each other to
We
have these
could,
meetings?
but what about the extravagance?
And there again lies the problem of their conscious mind and their conscious moral code wants them to do one thing, their evolutionary psychology and their subconscious mind wants them to do something completely different. And so they will come up with any sort of rationalizations they need to, or just avoid rationalizing anything at all, so that they can keep the grandiose extravagance while simultaneously insisting that morality requires self sacrifice, which means that in the parentheses, that means you peasants. You are the ones we shall sacrifice for our glorious future.
They're actually telling people that maybe you shouldn't have kids. I mean, they're still going to have kids and, pass off their enormous wealth to them. So we'll have people with massive amounts of money who didn't earn jack shit. But you, the hardworking man on the street, maybe you shouldn't have a family.
I mean to be fair, most of them actually aren't having kids because of the very same social justice ideology that they insist on believing. A lot of the women in particular in these casts wait until their late 30s to try and have kids, and there's only so much that fertility treatments can do, even with modern science. So
Yeah, but
that's
like,
why you get the bitter Hollywood actress going, I I wish people catcalled me more. I can't find a date. I can't find a date now that I'm in my 40s.
I mean, maybe, but like people like Bill Gates, and Bill Gates is a huge pusher of this climate initiative. Bill Gates already has his children, but he's telling other people maybe they shouldn't have theirs.
And to be fair, if we're trying to be intellectually honest here, we're at the business end of two previous population explosions, so maybe the population going down a little bit wouldn't be too terribly bad. But if that be the case, then that should apply to everyone, not just the peasants.
Well, the thing is, though, if we reduce the population, like, if we'll have like an aging population, like drawing benefits from the system, but we won't have as much of a younger generation to work and put resources in the system. Like that's one of the main problems that China is having. They have this one child policy for a long time, but now their population is starting to
Yeah,
age.
China shot themselves in the foot by getting rid of a large percentage of the population, in particular their female population, because we can't ask females to actually sustain their parents when they get older like we do the men. So that means that women are a net draw on the system rather than a net contribution to the system. We could solve that by just asking women to pull their weight like the men children do, but that would require us treating women like they were human beings and not goddesses for us to take care of.
Yeah,
Gynos- Live by the gynocentrism, die by the gynocentrism. Very goddamn literally.
yeah, but you see my point. Like you're gonna have a lot of older people who are gonna be a bigger burden on the system because they don't have kids to support them, so they're gonna rely on the government. And also like there's going to be a lot of jobs, a lot of things that need to be done, but we may not necessarily have the population to fill all of these roles.
Uh-huh. And in a sane world, we could solve 90% of these problems with automation. But unfortunately, rather than using automation for anything resembling humanitarian ends like it should be used, i.e., having robots doing the jobs that it's literally not sustainable for humans to do or that people die early from doing, um, basically replace what would have been done by slaves several hundred years ago with robots. Instead, they're replacing the middle management and the cashier and the service sector with robots, which is the exact goddamn opposite of what they should be doing. People people should be allowed to do service jobs at least for the foreseeable future. The jobs that should be being automated are the jobs that cause massive health risks to the people who've done them all these years. Like, your bricklayers, your miners, your sewage workers, and etc. But again, that would require people thinking too logically, and we can't have that in this day and age for some fucking reason.
you know Something that would also help to contribute uh, to reducing the climate thing, it would be getting people out of cities, because really it's these massive condensed metropolitan areas that produce a lot of the
Yeah,
carbon
when you
emissions.
when you when you put humans in a box, the waste of said humans begins to pile up like any other freaking animal. Whereas
And
if
think,
you let the humans fan out a little bit, the waste products also get spaced out, and therefore the contributions to the environment are somewhat minimalized.
the thing is, America is a massive country. Like we span from one end of the continent to the other. We have plenty of space where people could spread out, but it require people to be more self-sufficient, and people don't want to do that.
Yeah,
Like
it
even
reminds me a little bit, I kind of sadly, of the Mouse Utopia experiment towards the end. Even though they had like three times the space they would ever conceivably need to space out in, because rats are also a social species, they tend to cluster together instead of fanning out apart. So even though they had three times the space they would need to sustain their population, they clustered together instead and then died off.
yeah, I actually that it's a funny thing you bring that up. While I was coming back home in the airport waiting for my plane, there was this girl who looks like your typical Instagram um, e-girl who was like basically holding up her phone, probably recording herself, and she was like had like a bunch of makeup on and was like grooming her hair, and all I could think was, God damn, if this isn't the beautiful ones from the Mouse Utopia.
I, I mean, we're not quite there yet, but the trend is a bit concerning. Like it's one of those, like the line from A Christmas Carol again. If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, we we might wind up in a mouse utopia situation. The only saving grace for us as a species, and this is a very sad saving grace, is humans require more things to be in a utopia than mice do, and therefore it will probably be a longer time before we reach true mouse utopia levels. But again, the trends are a bit concerning regardless.
Yeah, but it just was something that crossed my mind. But also something I want to talk about is like people know that the climate is changing, but people aren't concerned about it because they know that it's not going to be like some day after tomorrow apocalyptic event where all of a sudden, like over the span of 3 days, North America is basically
Yeah, we're
uninhabitable.
not in a Roland Emmerich movie. At least, I hope to God we're not in a Roland Emmerich movie. That would be the final cherry on top of the shit sundae here if we were in a Roland Emmerich movie. If God is Roland Emmerich, I want off this planet now.
Unfortunately, though, there are people who believe that and they engage in absolutely insane protests. Do you remember some of these?
Yeah, the Extinction Rebellion, Just Stop Oil, um, basically and I made this comparison a long while ago when we did a discussion of climate cultism on your other channel there. I call it secular Gaianism because it basically is it's worship of Mother Earth without the polytheistic elements. It's people with entirely secular materialistic bents filling the hole in their lives with either social justice as a moral ideology or environmentalism as secular Gaianism,
Yeah,
or usually some combination of the two, if we're being entirely honest.
yeah. Call me crazy, Dalton, but I care more about humanity than I do about the Earth. Like, if there's no humans here, if we can't, build lives for ourselves, why the hell would I give a shit about the
Yeah,
planet?
but I mean that is a false dichotomy, and I would love to sit here in a situation where we didn't have to pick and choose because I very much like to sustain humanity and the Earth. But if gun of species wide extinction to my head, I think I think the Earth will be fine regardless because the Earth has been through far more severe climate changes in its history than we could ever conceivably bring into it, even if we just spouted greenhouse gases into the air every day forever. Like,
But here's the thing: the Earth is always going to exist. What state it is in is up for debate. And even if we make it so that the Earth isn't habitable for humans, the Earth itself will always be there.
until the sun either expands or explodes, the Earth is probably going to be fine.
Like the way these people are acting, they're acting as if we're going to somehow crack the core and cause the planet to break apart.
Yeah, as though someone is just gonna Superman punch the Earth and it's gonna shatter into a million pieces or something.
Yeah, but
And in fact, in a comic, me and Brainstormer are writing, my co-host on my other show. Um, we do actually have a Superman character who could, if he felt like it, do that. But unless I'm really missing something, the scale of people who are Superman powerful is fairly minimal. So I don't think someone is just gonna punch the Earth and it's just gonna go through the core and just shatter into a million pieces. Again, until the sun either expands or explodes, we're good as a planetary entity here.
yeah, that's insane because Sorry, not your comic idea, just the idea that people are, acting as if it's this level.
As though we don't even need to be that powerful in order to do this, which like I looked up, as research for this comic idea I have, the force it would take to crack both the Earth and the Moon. I don't think that even if all of the nukes on this planet went off at once, we could even crack the Moon, let alone the Earth, as things currently stand. So the Earth and the Moon probably are going to be fine for the foreseeable. Like the scale of time we're talking about is so incalculably vast that, again, the sun is still relatively young in its life cycle as a star. By the time it expands to consume what we now think of as the solar system, we probably won't even still be on the planet because we will have fucked off to parts unknown in the galaxy wider,
Or will they
by
piss
this
things
point,
off?
assuming we survive.
But yeah, like some of these protests are absolutely insane. Like they're gluing themselves to roads. Do you remember the story about these protesters who glued themselves to roads and this guy who was out on parole, like he was trying to get to his job, but they wouldn't get out of the way. So like he ended up getting arrested and going to jail because he missed his work,
Yeah. Also, they've started gluing themselves to pieces of art.
which is just insane. Like for the love of God, like I'm not even an arty type, but don't destroy the freaking art.
I mean, there's a reason why I go by the authenticator here on YouTube. It's because I consider artistic value to be a rational thing that can be defined. And as someone who does hold artistic value to a very, very, very high premium, I'm sorry, but if you're stupid enough to like glue yourself to a Monet painting, I don't want to be this asshole, but I'm gonna be this asshole anyway. You are less valuable than the Monet painting. I'm sorry. Your life is now forfeit in comparison to this painting. I don't want to be that, misanthropic, but these pieces of art have moved and bettered humanity to such a ludicrous degree and have existed for centuries. So your life as a human being versus the hundreds of millions of lives that will be positively impacted by this piece of art if we don't molest it. Again, I don't want to make that calculation, but if you force my hand to making that calculation, the art is more valuable than you. The only reason I'm not shooting you is because it might actually get on the art at that point.
I mean, why is it that people like this constantly want to destroy things created by men greater than themselves?
Because they don't believe in value. They believe that all value is entirely subjective. There's no intersubjective or objective like rigor behind it, and actually value itself is a harmful delusion that restricts our power and freedom as a civilization. So we need to wake up, quote unquote, from the delusion of value and become free in an entirely nihilistic world where nothing matters. Never mind that in a world where nothing matters, presumably the freedom you would have also does not matter, and that's the number one contradiction I always have with these people. If you truly believe that nothing matters, then the same course of action that led you to the belief that nothing matters also in turn doesn't matter. So why would you choose to believe that nothing matters? Like if you logically came to the conclusion that logic itself does not matter, then why pay attention to the logic that led you to that conclusion? Especially when alternative logics already exist that would allow you to believe that value does exist to some meaningful degree, and then you can make something positive of your life and or have a positive impact on the world regardless of your life if that's your speed.
Let me talk about some of these protests. There was a recent one where they destroyed gas stations in England and glued themselves to the four counters. First of all, that is incredibly dangerous. You don't just go around like attacking gas pumps. See, demonstration organized by Just Stop Oil. Do do these people are these people aware of how many things in our lives depend on oil? I mean, I hope you like all plastic products because if you get rid of oil, those things are all gone. And god damn, are there so many things in this world that use plastic?
I mean, it's funny because I've literally seen pictures of these people, these just stop oil people, again glued to the aforementioned pieces of art, while holding plastic cell phones, and I'm just like, you you are such an like, and again, it's not even a how could you possibly be that stupid? It's are you really that aristocratic that you can't follow A and get B? Like 2 plus 2 equals 4. God damn it! Like if you have two and you have another two, they should make four in any logical person's mind. But these people are so sheltered from the consequences of fucking anything that their ability to logically follow A and B and C and D is just completely obliterated from their brains. It it genu like this level of aristocratic foppishness is literally brain damage at this point. When you can no longer logic correctly, your lifestyle is damaging your brain. And I'm not saying that because of any mental disorders or delusions or hereditary. I'm just saying if you believe a thing and that thing has logical tenets and you can't logically follow those tenets because you don't see the logic in between them, your brain is not fit for purpose at that point.
All right, so let me tell you something. In There was an ancient Vatican statue that these morons glued themselves to. This statue, the Laocoon statue, carved in ancient Greece between 40 to 30 BC. This statue is literally older than my religion. And
Yeah,
these climate protesters glued themselves to it, um, to pressure the Vatican into, I believe, stop using coal.
but
Like,
the, they don't. They like as a religion, they don't really even use all that much coal. Like even the smoke that they use when they're in the middle of a conclave to determine whether they found a pope or not is, I believe, created through incense, which aren't even particularly coal derivative. I think it's all like plant resin and stuff. If I'm like I believe it's literally like frankincense and myrrh. If I'm not mistaken, I might be wrong, but I as someone who frequently uses incense for other spiritual purposes, most incense aren't even coal derivative. So like where is the Vatican using large amounts of coal? Because I
I'm not sure, but I think that on Vatican land they were mining for coal, and I think they're also going to start drilling for natural gas. I think it said in the article.
I mean, that's fine for them. And honestly, you would think these people would be in favor of that because it's a sign of the Catholic Church progressing, which, one would assume would be a good thing considering they've kind of been stuck in the early modern period for the last few centuries. And I'm I'm not making judgments one way or the other, but in their minds where history is a one-track Hegelian dialectic, you would think the Catholic Church coming into the modern era would be a good thing in their minds.
There's a statement that they released.
Oh, ye gods.
There will be no open museums, no art, no beauty in a world plagued by climate and ecological emergencies. The group said in a statement that was partially attributed to a 26-year-old art history graduate who glued her hand to the sculpture. I fucking hate the liberal arts.
Okay, okay, and as someone who once went to school for philosophy, which is in the humanities, I I hate what these goddamn people, and in particular the philosophical descendants of people like Rousseau and Hegel have done to my precious humanities. Because if and maybe not Socrates, because Socrates for some reason had an irrational hatred for art. It's one of the few disagreements I have with Socrates. Um, but many of the old philosophers would have precisely and amicably explained to them the logical fallacy they're committing here. Because of course, if if the world was to crash, one of the few things that would remain, as we know from the fact that all the structures we have are vast Neolithic stone sculptures from bygone eras, um, are the vast Neolithic stone sculptures from bygone eras. So even if the world crashed and burned horribly, one of the few things that would remain necessarily are things like ancient Greek sculptures, Stonehenge, and the pyramids. Unless, of course, you go ahead and destroy it because you're worried it won't exist anymore. That's literally a self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm worried that this thing that obviously will exist regardless of my desires will stop existing. So I'm going to destroy it as a sign to make sure it doesn't stop existing. Well, good for you in the abstract, my darling, but you've still destroyed one of the greatest, most ancient pieces of art in human existence. So again, I don't want to be an art accelerationist here, but I'm having a hard time not seeing these people's lives as less valuable than the arts they destroyed by their incompetence. They're moralistically and ideologically driven incompetence.
Yeah, so Just Stop Oil, the people who attacked the cast pumps, also did a bit of art adhesion. Let's see,
Uh,
they glued them. Let's see, it was in Glasgow, London, and Manchester. They glued themselves to pieces of valuable art, including from Vincent van Gogh, Horatio McClock, and J.M.W. Turner.
okay, you. I'm having a hard time not getting secondhand rage from the Van Gogh thing. The man cut off his own ear because he loved his art so much, and it literally drove him insane to the point that he committed suicide. The art that he made is a reflection of like a deliriously depressed man trying to turn me paint. Like most people, I assume, who have watched this will have seen that one episode from season 5 of Doctor Who, Vincent and the Doctor,
That was a
that
beautiful episode.
that is one of the best episodes in New Who, and possibly all of Doctor Who itself. That explained very quite rightly, in my opinion, that one of the things that makes Vincent van Gogh one of the greatest artists who ever lived is he transmuted the pain and anguish and torture of his mind into some of the most beautiful pieces of art ever made. And at this point, I must ask, has the man not suffered enough from you people and your societal norms and your morality and your aristocratic just foppishness? This is one of the reasons why Vincent van Gogh was depressed, because he just couldn't he couldn't live in a world that was so completely opposed to his particular proclivities. And I don't blame him, because at that time in history, things were ridiculously foppish and ridiculously stupid on the aristocratic side of things. So the new crop of aristocrats want to save the world for moralistically abstract reasons. And the first thing they think is, let's attack a Vincent van Gogh painting. I hate you. Again, don't want to turn myself into an art accelerationist here, but your life is less valuable than the things you are destroying. How can I not make this calculation?
Yeah, so the painting, the Van Gogh painting that they glued themselves to were called Peach Tree in Bloom. I've seen like pictures of this painting. It's absolutely beautiful. One of the greatest artists to ever walk the earth, capturing the beauty of nature in spring. And these assholes glued themselves to it to protest climate change.
You know, it occurs to me that if these people are right, they're not, but let's just, for the sake of argument, say that they were right. Let's say in a generation or so, the world is plunged into a dystopian ecological hellscape. Fine. One of the things that would make the remnants of humanity that would survive this Holocaust lives worth living is things like Van Gogh's paintings of natural scenes captured in his very particular style. And you people, by trying to save them from this possible future that, again, is wrong, devil's advocacy or no freaking devil's advocacy, you're trying to save them from this future by destroying the things that would have probably pulled them out of it, or at least given them something to aspire to. And the thing is, humans need something to aspire to. It doesn't have to be religious, it doesn't have to be ideological, but they need something that's capable of moving them. And if you destroy everything that's capable of moving them for aristocratic, moralistic bullshit reasons, you will cause the remaining people who need these beautiful things to survive in a post-apocalyptic world to kill themselves in sheer despair. And I will not let that happen as long as I am capable of drawing breath. I mean, I don't want to become, I don't want to literally become a terrorist in the name of art, but they're really, really forcing my hand here.
But the thing is, look, these people could never create something that beautiful.
No, because again, what we know of Van Gogh is that the reason he was able to capture such ecstatic beauty was because he was transmuting his abject misery and pain into said ecstatic beauty. And these people have never suffered enough to know the difference between the depths of human suffering and the highs of human beauty. And this is something that you can notice in almost every artistic person. A lot of artists, for better or worse, are miserable. And they choose to turn this misery not into yet more misery. They don't become morose and cynical. They turn their sorrow, their suffering, into beauty to attempt to rebalance the world, basically. Van Gogh did it. I would argue that H.P. Lovecraft did it to some degree, despite all the argle, florgle, blorgle racism accusations that are thrown his way in this day. And quite frankly, I think in a century or so, we're probably going to regard Lovecraft in the same way we regard Van Gogh, at least to some degree. William Blake did it. There was an entire concept in ancient Greek society that referred to the madness of poets or the suffering of poets. It was considered to be there were two schools of art in the ancient Greek world, at least according to people like Nietzsche. One was called the Apollonian school of art, and one was called the Dionysian school of art. The Apollonian school of art was the school of art that was focused on reason, mathematics, beauty in like a methodical, rational sense. And Dionysian art, which was said to be influenced by the god Dionysus, was considered to be the art that was drawn from emotion, pain, and sorrow. And these people honestly have the capacity for neither of these things, and it pisses me off. Duality of man and art is going to have to be a thing soon. I'm calling it now because it just yeah, I have a lot to say on the subject. It's not really germane to the environmentalist thing.
I actually have a list of all the pieces of art these assholes have glued themselves to. Do you want to go through it?
Oh,
Horatio McClock's My Heart's in the Highlands, which is a painting of the Scottish Highlands in 1860. We talked about Vincent van Gogh's Peach Trees in Blossom. J.M.W. Turner's Thompson's Alien's Harp. Like the first three were pictures of nature. John Constable's The Haywain, which looks to be a picture of a small town, like over the course of centuries, like as like it's developing.
that's just the irony is, I'm sure, entirely lost on these people, but it. again, I don't want to become an art terrorist, but they're really making it hard not to become an art terrorist.
Okay, no, it's sorry, I was wrong. It's actually a scene of a countryside full of dying trees, plains, and an encroaching city. The irony of that.
Gee, I wonder. Oh, just the the lack of self awareness and the irony. I just can't. I can't even with it. It's just
Okay, this
you.
one made me mad.
Uh,
Guillaume Pietrino's The Last Supper, which is actually a copy of The Last Supper made by a student of Da Vinci himself.
yeah, there were several reproductions of Da Vinci's famous works because he had apprentices and he basically used a lot of his famous paintings as teaching tools, which again just makes me have infinite amounts of respect for Da Vinci. But I mean, my God.
It's like a damn good reproduction.
Well,
So,
I'm sure Leonardo was literally standing over his shoulder while he was doing it. Like,
even if the master
no.
himself
This
is,
is how you do it, and so on.
here's the thing, even if the master himself is standing behind you, like painting this still requires a massive amount of talent.
Yeah, no, I mean, you had to be of a particular skill level to even become an apprentice to Da Vinci because he wouldn't waste his time on someone who didn't have the spark of creativity or what have you. Um,
They glued themselves to Sandro Botticelli's Primavera.
so a apprentice of Da Vinci, a Van Gogh, and now a Botticelli. That's I again my art fanboyism is driving me to do horrible things to these people in my head. So I'm constructing mental saw traps for these people now. Uh, and no, I'm not actually going to do it, but let me have my murderous moments of rage, please. Uh,
They glued themselves to, I hope I pronounced his last name correctly, Umberto Boccioni's Unique Forms of Continuity in Space, which is an art statue created in 1913.
huh. And ironically, that would have been around the era when the Frankfurt School got started and all this gobbledygook became academically acceptable. So it's literally eating itself. I mean that's a small mercy that the Frankfurt School style logic is eating itself slowly, but you're taking everything I love with it with you, goddammit, and I don't. It's not worth it. I don't want to see you die just to I don't want to see all these beautiful things die just in the hopes that you'll be killed off too. Just stop, please. I beg you.
Let's see,
Uh,
Laocoon and His Sons, which is the statue from the Vatican that they glue themselves to. Like, this statue is beautiful. Like, I don't know of a single artist in the modern world who makes sculptures who could recreate this level of detail and have it last for millennia.
yeah, it's I again. I call myself the authenticator for a goddamn reason, and it's because I believe that subjectivity or no fucking subjectivity, there is something at least intersubjective and like mathematically definable about art, like real, true, honest, good art. It's not just Jungian psychological bullshit. It's not just my themes and my, abstract utilitarianism of society and culture and art. There is something truly and intrinsically valuable inherently about these pieces. And whether you want to chalk it up to the muses or the Abrahamic God or just human intuition or independent spontaneous invention or like there's a number of things you can attribute it to that don't boil down to my psychology or my subjectivity or my human spirit or whatever. But regardless, one way or the other, it comes from something that is above simple human like whimsy, and it pains me horribly to see it destroyed.
Yeah, they also handcuffed themselves to a chapel, Scorvegni Chapel, And the reason they did it is because this is in Padua, Italy. They call themselves to it because there is an incredibly beautiful fresco painted in the chapel that was painted, and let me check, 1305.
Again, I there are very few things for which I would start an inquisition, but people, if I were in charge of the universe, there would be a special place in hell for people who ruined art. And
I know some people aren't necessarily interested in religious iconography, but this is a very, very beautiful chapel. Like from the walls to the ceilings to the back wall, like
the worth speaks for itself, religion or no freaking religion, and that's exactly what I mean. You don't have to be a religious person to be moved by Michelangelo or Da Vinci or any of the other great masters who used things that they learned from um the Greco-Roman empires in like a monotheistic religious context. It's still beautiful. Now, I could make an argument that the polytheistic stuff they were being derivative of is somewhat more beautiful than the monotheistic stuff they created. But regardless, there is a definite continuity there, and I think both sides of this would respect the other for their craftsmanship because craftsmanship is inherently valuable, humans or no freaking humans, to some degree anyway.
yeah. And a lot of these artists took years in order to complete these pieces. Like these weren't something that they did over a long weekend.
And again, it's also a piece of history as well. Like the reproduction of the Last Supper created by one of Da Vinci's students. It, it's that not only is a achievement in and of itself, but it also connects us on a human level and on a historical level to the lives of Da Vinci and his students. Something we wouldn't have if it weren't for that painting. You could almost, even just hearing it described, I could literally see Leonardo just standing there, you know giving his student the side eye as he like micromanages the brushstrokes. No, 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 do it like this, do it like this. Yes, Leonardo. And I can see that, and that's a very human. It 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 reminds you that these great figures from history were actual people who had lives and who had students and friends and people they had a impact on directly while they were still alive, let alone all the thousands and possibly millions of people that these people have um, inspired posthumously. Um, but yeah, not only is it a travesty to ruin art, but almost as close as the travesty of ruining history. And when both overlap, when it's art history that you're ruining, I again, I'm beginning to think maybe we should get some stakes and glue these people to a wooden stake or two. Well, considering they love being glued to things so much, maybe we could do this. It would be better for the world at that point.
And the thing is, like, these are things that we can't really be reproduced. Like, it's not going to be the same thing. Like, you're not going to get the same majesty of it if you view just a picture of it.
Yeah, it's the ship of Theseus thing of like there are only so many times you can make a copy of a copy of a copy before it loses something. And even in modern art, that's a little bit less grandiose. You see that like whenever there's an adaptation of a comic or something that you love, even if it's a reasonably good facsimile, it does like for example, a lot of people are aware of the fact that there was a shot-for-shot remake of Psycho that was done a couple of years ago. Um, and even though it was technically a shot-for-shot remake and replicated as good as it could the original feel of the original Psycho, it was very obviously missing something. And if something that veers that closely can still be missing something after the fact, then again, I'm call it human intuition, call it independent spontaneous invention, call it the muses, call it angels, call it whatever. something non-human or a effect of the natural world itself is inspiring these things. And much as lightning very rarely ever strikes the same place twice, even the same people often struggle to replicate their successes a second time around. Like, completely sidebar, but there was recently a Netflix adaptation of Neil Gaiman's The Sandman, and Neil Gaiman himself was behind it and helped with it, but it was still very obviously missing something. And whenever Neil was faced with the fact that it was very obviously missing something, he would basically try to bully the people who had problems with it by authorial intent. I'm the author, so shut up. But the thing is, he's not the same person he was in 1988 when he originally made The Sandman. And and arguably, and I have argued in the past that I think he might have had help from some friends on the other side, but that's neither here nor there.
I
But
mean,
even people,
even Tolkien shared his ideas for Lord of the Rings with C.S. Lewis.
yeah, and it's very hard for one of them to replicate the feelings of the other, and so on and so forth. And my point being is, if even the people who made the originals can't reproduce the originals, then what on earth makes you think that, oh, we'll just get a reproduction, it'll be fine. It won't change anything. And I'll say this also as an antique collector. I can tolerate reproductions to a certain degree, especially if the real deal is super super expensive. But I would always prefer to have the original, and it's not because simply of the like subtle physical difference. I think there's a difference in like energy as well, because when an object has existed for centuries, it sort of picks up the energy of all that time and all the people and things it has come into contact with. And you can, if you're very good at spotting antiques, you can usually tell when something has that kind of weight to it, or
I was just
doesn't.
about to, I was just about to say that like it has weight from like ages of being passed from one person to another, and like I've been to museums and like I even though I'm not a super artistic type, like even though I couldn't explain to you um like the artistic theories or like the use of colors or brush strokes, like when I'm looking at something that a man poured his heart and soul into and that's existed for a long time, I can feel that.
Yeah, yeah, and because of and for the record, I know we've been bashing the environmentalists and the social justice types. I would say the same thing to a fundamentalist Christian who wanted to burn heretical art because it was too pagan or whatever. And I have many many times. Morality is not a good reason to. Morality shouldn't supersede art unless like there's something genuinely immoral. Like if there's a piece of art that's made of like human skin or something, then fresh human skin, as in somebody murdered somebody, then maybe. But like as long as like as long as we're talking about morality in the abstract, in particular, in the authoritarian abstract, morality doesn't supersede art. I'm sorry, it doesn't, and it never should. And some of the greatest travesties in human history have been because some asshole thought that their morality superseded art at all. And again, maybe we'll have to discuss this on another episode of the duality of man and art. But
Yeah,
back
I feel like
to
we've gone off into the woods of art,
yeah
but
yeah back to the secular Gaianists and their apocalypticism.
well, because of Thor in Ukraine and
E, you went quiet. I don't know what happened.
are you okay?
No, I just couldn't hear you. You cut off in mid sentence there.
Done.
Yeah, I can still hear you.
All right. Sorry, you were kind of going fuzzy there for a while, but
Oh, okay. So it was on both ends maybe that time. Yeah,
yeah,
you got quiet. You got quiet too there. That's why I was confused.
but you know, we're going into an energy crisis, and people were importing a lot of gas and natural gas from Russia, despite the fact that years ago President Donald Trump, like, especially went to Europe and told them, stop buying your energy
Hmm.
from Russia. You consider Russia to be an enemy. Why on earth would you buy your energy from them?
The cognitive dissonance is so wide that even I can see it. I, Trump, can see the cognitive dissonance. What the hell?
The thing is, like, people did not like Trump, but on this, he was absolutely correct.
Yeah, I mean, the man can be as odious as you like, but laugh not at this man in this instance, for he is not wrong.
So, thing is, we in America, we have a lot of gas deposits, but instead of drilling for them, either for gas or sorry, either for oil and natural gas. Like, our president instead went to Saudi Arabia and asked them if they could provide more oil. No, don't look for oil here at home with all the land that we have. Let's go to the Saudis. And even
Yeah,
then, the
yeah,
Saudis
those incredibly primitive theocrats who haven't evolved since like the 6th century or whatever. Yeah, I'm sure we should just ask them rather than buttressing our own
and the funny
civilization
thing
or anything.
is, they said, yeah, we can't. We are literally at our capacity to produce oil. Like, even if we want, like, there is no more room to go. Like, we just do not have the, like, infrastructure to produce more
We're at
oil.
maximum. We're at maximum here. We have nowhere else to. We couldn't put another refinery in if we wanted to. What the hell?
Yeah, and so, like, the Saudis can't produce more oil, and the Biden administration refuses to allow more oil and natural gas drilling here. And now they just, did you hear about the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, which, like, not
The
long after it was,
the benevolent euphemism that will do the opposite of what it wants to act. Although to be fair, that could fit just about every uh, fancy smancy named act. You know, the Violence Against Women Act probably actually made the violence against women problem quite a lot worse. Never mind that it also fucking ignored all the male domestic violence, but whatever.
yeah, and I'm pretty sure that after I believe that after it passed the Inflation Reduction Act, they started calling it something else. Hold on, let's see if I
Because
can.
why should we be subtle at all, Herp? I, I despair. It's like shouting. It's like shouting at someone who is very obviously stupid to stop being stupid. It's just it's not. It's but I'll do it. God damn it, I'll do it.
Yeah, I can't find what they what the new name for it was, but it was something regarding energy. So while they were trying to get the thing passed, it was called the Inflation Reduction Act. After they pass it, it's called, like, the Green Energy um, Act or something like that. But it just goes to show the government can barely do anything without first deceiving the American people. Like, focusing on green energy when almost our entire system relies on natural gas and oil is only going to further raise inflation.
Well, that and if we wanted to, i.e., if we were sane and rational human beings and capable of doing things that made sense, we could spend a couple of years slowly upgrading the grid for nuclear power, i.e., the one sustainable non-fossil fuel that we have, and that would also create jobs because let's face it, the power grid hasn't really been fully updated since like the 70s anyway, and really, really, really is outdated and in need of being upgraded anyway. So since our infrastructure, particularly our electrical infrastructure, gets a grade of D from the Army Corps of Engineers, we could create jobs to upgrade our power grid and sustainably pull from nuclear and slowly wean ourselves off of fossil fuels in the meantime. Or we could create secular Gaianistic bullshit that is not sustainable or efficient and then wonder why everyone is against us for doing it. And of course, the powers that be go with the second option because why the fuck not?
The thing is, a lot of these green technologies that people want to invest in don't scale up. Like you
Because
cannot
they're still in like the prototype phase. Basically, they're
like
not
you
they're not finalized pieces of technology.
yeah
And no
you
matter how many of them you make, they're still not going to be finalized pieces of technology. They are not efficient enough to function for the purpose for which. And funnily enough, historically, the main reason why we didn't use steam power for everything, even though steam power was much more sustainable in retrospect, is because we basically viewed fossil fuels as a stopgap until we could get steam power to the point where it was efficient and sustainable for everything. And we just spontaneously forgot that we were using fossil fuels as a stopgap. And now, instead of using the same stopgap that we have against fossil fuels, which would be nuclear, which we could easily turn also into steam power if we wanted to, it would be incredibly efficient to do so. We're dragging our feet getting rid of fossil fuels. We're dragging our feet trying to find other alternatives to nuclear power because we're so scared of fucking nukes. And in the meantime, we're slowly killing ourselves, the planet, and everything in between,
uh,
while simultaneously also trying to save it.
yeah that's what I was going to say. Like use fossil fuels and nuclear energy while we can, but like work on new technologies that could get us to a more energy efficient future.
Yeah, if you want,
I'm
if
not
you
opposed to it. It's just the stuff we have now isn't going to work, and I'm
they're
all for
not they're
solutions that
not
work.
efficient. They don't scale. They don't function for the purposes of which they're intended because they're still basically prototypes. They're just prototypes that we, for some reason, put all our eggs into, even though they're not efficient enough yet to be sustainable.
Not only that, but they're incredibly limited. Wind turbines won't turn if there is no wind. Solar panels won't work if you have no sun. Like for our current society, we need stuff that produces energy 24/7, rain or shine,
Like nukes, or rather like nuclear power.
or fossil fuels.
It's like the answers you have are obvious and they would work fine if you only just thought about it for 5 seconds. But that would require using your brain for more than 5 seconds and not using it in the abstract, but using it for literal concrete things. And for some reason, not only are people just generally incapable of thinking in this day and age, but they also, when they do bother thinking, would rather think in the abstract and the moralistic dimension rather than the concrete dimension. Because wouldn't you know it, thinking of things in concrete, efficient terms is toxic masculinity. And only truly intelligent people think in the abstract, therefore let's all think in the abstract. Never mind that we have practical problems that need non abstract solutions.
It's like these people are saying this needs to be done immediately. I have no plan to make this actually work, and there's going to be serious consequences if we just stop everything immediately. But because
We're going to do it
reasons,
anyway.
yeah,
And if you at any point have a problem with this, or question our data, or offer alternative data of your own, then you are a bad person and therefore invalid, and therefore we will not listen to you no matter how inherently worthwhile your data is.
And the thing is, all these people live in like large carbon producing cities. They're not going to leave and live off the land and reduce their own carbon footprint. They're going to make it so that you have to.
Yeah, that's just yeah, that's also, and again, I have to bring up the thing of most of the actual most of the actual ways to make fossil fuels more efficient that we have, we're already doing in the West. Not, like 70% of the carbon output comes from places like China and Russia. Are
In
we
India.
going to yeah, are we going to at any point um, make these empires accountable for what they're doing? Or are we just going to continue guilt tripping ourselves, even though we're doing literally everything it makes sense to do already, and we have been for several decades?
Yeah, we're going to keep doing it until the point where we're shooting ourselves in both foots, while these other countries are doing everything possible to get a leg up on us.
Yep, yep. That sounds like a totally sane thing to do. We're already doing everything it makes sense to do, but we're just gonna keep doing it harder. Are we going to actually address the people causing the problem? No. They're just going to be free to continue causing the problem until their civilization crash and burn. But don't worry, it won't be long now. Um, and we're going to keep guilt tripping ourselves until we either bite the very literal bullet and just commit suicide en masse, or we live in a dystopian hellscape to save the secular equivalent of Mother Gaia. Because reasons.
Let's not forget that while we are going through a crisis where gas was up to like $4 or $5 a gallon, the president of the United States was selling America's strategic petroleum reserves on the open market, which I'm pretty sure he did not have the authority to do.
Yeah, and of course the question becomes, why in all God's names would you not simply give it to your own people rather than selling it to other? Like, I'm all for international trade when you have a surplus, but we very obviously don't have a fucking surplus at the moment. So we should keep our resources to sustain our own people instead of in a very like classically tyrannical fashion, loving the foreigner so much that we begin to hate ourselves.
All right, we've been going for over an hour and a half. I think this is a good place to end it.
Yep.
Everybody, I've been Mystery.
I've been Milton Mortimer, the Authenticator. Please don't subscribe to ideology that will then result in you doing the exact opposite of the thing you're trying to do. Please, just don't. Cheers.
See you, everybody.